All right, today I want to talk about something that's extremely consequential in disc golf, but is not talked about enough, particularly as it pertains to training in this sport. And it's the idea of coefficients of friction. It sounds very sciencey, but it's actually not really that complicated. We're really just talking about the way that different substances interact with each other when they rub against each other. The coefficient of friction kind of informs everything that you do in the world, and it goes on whether or not you're aware of it or not. And in order to relay a personal story about a coefficient of friction experience, I wanted to tell you about something that happened a couple of months ago. I was lying in bed, watching Netflix, I think, eating sushi. Sounds very bougie, I understand, but that's what I was doing. And I looked over to my left at some point, kind of paying half attention to the show. And I had two ramekins sitting next to me. One ramekin had wasabi in it, a thick, pasty material, and the other one had soy sauce in it. And I wanted the wasabi to go refresh the thing that I was dipping in. So I reached over kind of absent-mindedly and I picked up what I believed was the wasabi container. I picked up the ramekin, started to lift it, and in an instant I splashed myself in soy sauce because my brain had made this on-the-fly calculation, accounting for the viscosity, the friction coefficients of the wasabi and the rim of the ramekin together. It had calculated for that, but when I picked up the thing that was basically the same as water, which is what soy sauce is, I splashed it all over myself because my brain gave me this larger impulse of energy instinctively, thinking it was picking up a different material. Coefficients of friction, we account for them all the time in the world, and they matter a ton in disc golf. In fact, they matter so much that coefficients of friction and the way that your brain relates to them actually explains one of the biggest conundrums that people face when they're trying to translate practice that they do in an indoor environment like this one, a controlled environment with a controlled surface, to either field work or to the course. So you can imagine you spend the whole winter practicing. Maybe you've got your tech disc with you. Maybe you're just throwing into your net in your garage. Whatever the case is, you get very used to the surface that your body's planting on. You get very used to how your foot connects to the ground. And your brain begins to understand how much energy you can push into the ground to then get back up from the floor in return to add energy to your throwing arm when you're sequencing correctly. And when you're in an indoor environment like this one, or like a really grippy concrete surface or something, this is a really fine grit AstroTurf that I bought from Home Depot, in case anyone's wondering. They have a whole bunch of different sheets of AstroTurf, and you can go in there and buy it you basically buy it by, I think the square foot or maybe the square yard, but it's about 10 feet wide and you can just get a huge carpet of it if you really want to, and it's not very expensive. It makes an amazing surface. This is like the densest stuff that they carry. But when you throw on a surface like this, you get really used to planting on it. You get really used to how it feels. But when you go out into the field, the coefficient of friction between your foot, your shoe, and the wet grass, or the pavement that cars drive on, or the dirt that you're planting on, or maybe even the snow, is totally different. And your brain doesn't understand it. So it doesn't plant the same way. It doesn't plant as hard or aggressively. You come down softer instinctively because your brain doesn't want you to commit a ton of energy just to have your leg fly out from underneath you and have you tumble like Kevin Jones did at that event when he aced like the 500-foot hole. And then as far as translating a throw that you might work on at home or in the field to a course, and maybe you've got a favorite tee pad that you always like to practice on because you know the distance. I have one of these myself. It's like a 300-foot shot uphill that I'll talk about quite a bit in the documentary. That tee pad has probably had people plant on it 10 million times. And it is so smooth, even though it's made out of concrete, that it's quite slick underneath my foot. And for years, I had been practicing in my backyard, making tons of progress into the net, but as soon as I went back to the course to try to throw in the hole I practiced on, I could not get the form to translate from here or outside into the net to anything even close to that when I was out on the course. It was so maddening, and I didn't understand it even though it was totally obvious. But recently, as a consequence of really learning the biomechanics and really trusting my footing, and then I would go out to the field and I would practice, and I would find that I could not produce the same energy. And one of the things that the method and proper sequencing and biomechanical leverage harnessing teach you is you know when you're doing it right, and you really know when you're doing it wrong because the feel isn't the same. And so I would go out to the hole one at North Park here in Seattle, and I would throw hole one, and I would not get the same kind of energy in my arm. The disc wouldn't weigh the same. Everything would be screwed up. And the other consequence is that when you don't trust the surface, and you don't plant as hard into it, your foot starts to spin out more. And when your foot spins out, as you compress against your brace leg, the trajectory of your throw completely changes. If I'm here, imagine this, and I'm throwing towards the camera, and I expect the disc to come out here because I expect my foot to stop here. But if my foot moves 15 or 20 degrees, now the energy is going this way. That's where I'm bracing, but I'm throwing that way. So what happens? I start to accelerate, and the disc is back here when it comes out because it has to down the target line. And then I'm super quick and fast in my backswing, and my arm looks super fast on camera, and I go, wow, I've got great arm speed, but I can only throw 52 miles an hour. It's because of frictions of coefficient between your brace leg, your plant foot, and the ground. Your brain doesn't trust it. So there is a workaround, fortunately. You can either train yourself trusting a new surface, and that takes years, or if you really want to translate the practice that you're doing from a controlled environment like this lab, for example, to the course, buy yourself a piece of AstroTurf. I got one a little while ago. I actually cut it off, the main one that we use for the shoot. But this isn't all that big, honestly. It probably weighs about 10 pounds, maybe about 8, and I could put it inside of a duffel bag or something. It's 4 feet long and 4 feet wide and 10 feet long. So it was cut off this main strip. I could lay this down anywhere. I could lay it down in a parking lot. I could lay it down at a soccer field. I could lay it down even at a course, honestly. It would overlay perfectly on most tee pads. And I could feel this indoor coefficient of friction all the way out there in the field. The difference will be profound. If you really want to experience what it's like to throw your shots out in the field or on a course the way that you do in the lab, get yourself a piece of AstroTurf like this and try it out.